Hey there folks, in this video I'm going to be showing you how you can create a realistic looking human eye which would serve the purpose of an NFT asset. This is 100% vector based as you can see, and if you're following along you should be able to obtain the same result. You can use this as the base of different eye variations for your NFT projects, or of course apply this method of creating an eye in Adobe Illustrator for any type of project you might be working on. Without further ado, let's go ahead and start the process from scratch so we can go through it step by step. First, go to File, New, and let's select an appropriate size for our artboard. Let's go with 1024 by 1024 just to keep this simple. Leave all the other settings as they are, but I do recommend having from our advanced options here the RGB color mode selected. For raster, we don't care since this is a vector, so let's just go ahead and hit create. Alright, first things first, we're gonna go ahead and grab the ellipse tool. You'll find it here under shapes. Just right click and you'll see it, or you can press L on your keyboard. Now we go to the top left corner of the screen, and by holding down the shift key, just click and drag towards the bottom right corner of the screen. This should create a perfect circle, and when you're satisfied with the size, release the keys. You can also click on the board with the ellipse selected and manually enter the desired width and height. Now with the circle selected, go to the Align menu and align both vertically and horizontally. Make sure the Align to setting is set to Align to Artboard. Usually Align to Selection is used, but for the purposes of this demonstration we're using Align to Artboard. If you don't see this menu, just go to Window, Align, or you can press Shift F7. Also make sure you have your Layers menu turned on as well as the Properties menu. And since we're on this topic, I'm using Essentials Classic as my default layout, by the way. Yours might look a bit different if you have something else selected. Alright, now that we got this out of the way, let's go ahead and select the ellipse from our layers here and turn off its stroke. And for fill, we will apply a radial gradient. Go to Gradient Options, select the middle one, which is radial, and then for this outer ridge, the color is a bit too dark, so let's add a color stop by clicking on the gradient slider somewhere here. And now let's drag this down to remove it. Now move this gray color to the end of the slider and move the handle towards its maximum limit. Now that's done, we have our eyeball shape. Let's name it as such because we should always name our shapes to know what's what. And also let's go ahead and lock it. Next, with the ellipse selected, we're gonna create our iris, so let's give it this brown color here. And again, by shift click and dragging, we're going to create an appropriate size iris. Align this one vertically and horizontally as well. And now let's grab the line tool here. Set the fill to no fill, and for the stroke, let's bump this up to 1 pixel. Now let me zoom in so you can see. And from the upper edge here, let's click and by holding down shift to create a straight line, come down towards the bottom of the circle. That's fine. Now let's align this one as well. And now from this menu here, we will change the width profile of the line by selecting the width profile 1. This makes our line thinner at the edges and thicker at the center. Now go to Effect, Distort and Transform, and select Transform. Hit preview and we'll set the number of copies to 14, and then from the angle here just highlight the value and press the up arrow on your keyboard to increase the degrees gradually. We should aim for an even spread, and it seems like 12 degrees is just right. Hit OK, and now let's go to Object, Expand Appearance, so we can have all the lines individually selected. Now go to Effect, Distort and Transform, and select Roughen. Hit preview on that, and let's make the point smooth and set the size to 1%. And by highlighting the detail value and pressing up and down arrows on your keyboard, you can play with the details to find whatever option you think looks good. I would say 8 does the trick for me. And now using our selection tool, and making sure the shape is selected, press Ctrl or Command C to copy and Ctrl or Command F to paste in front. Now grab one of the corners and rotate it a little bit until it's clearly visible from the other set of lines, and let's give this one a different color. Now right click on it, go to Transform and select Reset Bounding Box. And again, with the Control Command C plus Control Command F to copy paste in front, and also rotate this new set of lines to fill the remaining gap and give it a different color as well, and also reset its bounding box. And to create a bit of variety, let's make some shapes bigger, some smaller. So by holding down the Shift key, grab two opposite corners and let's make this shape a little bit smaller. And make sure it's aligned to the center. Now select the shape below it and make this one a little bit bigger, also by holding down the Shift key and dragging the two opposite corners. And this one should also be aligned, of course. Alright, this is starting to take shape. Now let's go ahead and select all three line layers and then right click and select group so we can group them. And now let's go ahead and set a radial gradient for the newly formed group. Select gradient, then gradient options and choose radial type. Now for the left color, which is the center of our shape, let's give it this light brown. And then for the right color, which is the outer edge of our shape, I'll give it this dark brown color. Now in order to better see what we're doing, press Command or Ctrl H on your keyboard to hide the outlines, and click somewhere on the gradient slider to add a new color. And let's shuffle the colors around on the scale so we can bring the lighter brown towards the middle. And add just one more color and distribute them a bit across the slider to whatever position suits you. Feel free to play around with the colors and observe the effect this has on your shape. Looks pretty good for now. Don't forget to bring back the outline by using Ctrl or Command H. And now in order to see the outlines for the shape that we've created, go to Expand Appearance once again. Now copy paste this group in order to duplicate it and rotate the copy a little bit to fill in the gaps. And right click and go to Transform, select Vertical and click OK. This will create a bit of variety for our lines, and make sure to reset the bounding box if you suffer from OCD like I do. Another important step, OCD or not, you have to name your shapes to keep them organized. So let's call this one the iris, and this will be our lines, and then this will be our lines copy. Now select just the lines copy and open the transparency menu. Do a Ctrl H to better see what you're doing, and let's cycle through the transparency options a bit. You can play around with those and select whatever you think looks better. I think I'm gonna stick to the color dodge option. I like how it looks like it's emanating a bright light from its center. Next, we're gonna create a pupil. Let's grab our lips and then choose black for the color. And again, by shift clicking and dragging to create a perfect circle. I'm gonna do an appropriate size one. Let's make sure it's aligned to the center and let's adjust it a little bit. There we go. So far so good, but it's gonna look a lot better once we start applying the radial gradient effect to the iris as well. Currently it's a flat color and doesn't look that good. So select the gradient and just like we did for the lines, I'm gonna select a lighter brown for the middle and a darker one for the outer edge. And of course, to make this more interesting, we're gonna apply another color. And then we can also reshuffle the colors and play with the handles to obtain something that's really visually pleasing. Just making some small adjustments here by dragging the handles until we're completely satisfied with the way it looks. Let's name the pupil real quick, and one thing I noticed about the eyes is that the iris lines sort of look like they are descending into the pupil, because the pupil is basically a hole which allows light through it, I think. So in order to obtain that effect, we grab the gradient tool, make the center color black as well, and then we're gonna add another color stop right here at the edge, and making sure we are setting the opacity of it to 0. And just like that, now by adjusting the handle and the color sliders directly on our artwork here, we can control the amount of fade between the iris and the pupil. Now as you can see, the lines sort of look like they are descending towards the middle black hole, which is our pupil. Another thing that we're gonna do is select our iris and use the same trick to put a darker rim color, because again, if you look at an eyeball, it usually has a darker colored rim than the rest of the iris. This time we're gonna apply it directly on the artwork since we have our gradient tool selected. Just click to add the color and then double click to open the color menu, when we can do some adjustments, bringing those values back a little bit as I'm doing here. I'm also just gonna remove the blue completely, and then of course we can play with the color stop and with the handle to make some adjustments, and just zoom in out to see the final result. And one last thing, for extra realism, if you look at an eyeball, you can see that the iris blends into the eyeball smoothly. So again, let's add another color stop here at the outer edge and then set the opacity to 0. And adjust the positions of the colors as well as the handles if needed, so you can obtain this smooth blending effect between the iris and the eyeball. Another thing that I would like to do is to make the lines also blend smoothly into the outer edge of the eyeball. So let's go ahead and select both line shape layers, go to fill, and then we're gonna select gradient options. And you guessed it, we're gonna add another color stop at the outer edge here and also set its opacity to 0, just like we did for the iris and the pupil. Now, since this is not a perfect circle, Illustrator kinda cuts into it a bit too much, but no problem, we can easily fix this by enlarging our line shapes a little bit. So let's go ahead and select both our line layers, grab the selection tool and drag 2 opposite corners outwards so we can obtain the bigger shape. And make sure it's still aligned both vertically and horizontally as well. And now let's zoom in a little bit to see the result. As you can see, the lines blend smoothly into the outer edge of the iris. One last step before we're done, let's go ahead and unlock the eyeball shape, and we're gonna use it to start creating some nice reflections. Select the eyeball and then Control and Command C to copy and Control and Command B to paste them back. And then I'm dragging it on top of everything else. And now everything disappeared, but do not despair, we're gonna fix that. Gradient options, and first let's change this outer edge color to complete white, and then I'm gonna also set the opacity to 0 and drag this handle all the way to the left, which is the middle of our circle. Now let's go ahead and select the gradient tool and let's zoom out a little bit, but so we can see exactly what we're doing. Well, I'm just gonna click somewhere around here, and this will give us some sort of a light source, quote unquote. And as you can see, you can play around with it to set whatever the light is coming from and reflecting across the eyeball. Now using our direct selection tool, just double click on the anchor point here at the bottom of the eye and drag it to about the middle of the pupil here. And using one of the handles, place a curve like so. You can definitely curve it any way you would like, and also play with our light source here. I'm also just quickly going to change the opacity of the other color because it's a bit too bright and it obstructs too much of the eye. I'm going to take this and just copy and paste it in front, make it a bit smaller and rotate it as well, and just drag it towards the bottom here. And we're going to change the transparency type to overlay. Now let's select the gradient tool and play around with the light source. As you can see, as I bring this closer towards the iris, it creates a nice effect, makes this portion look a little bit brighter, again adding a bit to the realism of an actual eye. Now finally, we're going to create the signature orb of reflection that you see on any type of eye illustration. I think it really helps sell the idea of an eye, so that's why it's so common, therefore we cannot miss it. You don't need to change any settings for the gradient, but make sure to play with this a little bit so you can create a nice reflection that looks best for you. And there you go, that's pretty much it. Let's not forget to name our shapes here. I'm going to call this Refle 1 and this one Refle 2. The ellipse is a small warp, so I'll leave it like that. And most importantly, let's group them, and this will be our reflections group. The lines copy plus the iris will be our iris, Oops, sorry, I got the reflections group into that, but not a problem. Let's just go ahead and drag it out here and name the iris, and then we're gonna drag our pupil on top of the iris, and that's it, we're done. Alright, let's go ahead and select our iris group and then do a Ctrl or Command H on your keyboard to hide the outlines. And let's go to Edit, Edit Colors, Adjust Color Balance. Hit preview on that and start playing around with the sliders. And as you can see, as easy as that, you're now able to change the color of the iris to whatever you'd like. It's kind of like in a video game where you're customizing your character, only here you have hundreds or even thousands of potential combinations at your fingertips, all for about 15 minutes of work. So let me find a nice color here. I'm quite picky, so bear with me. Okay, this is about right. Hit OK on that. Then to export this, all you need to do is go to File, Export, Export As, and usually PNG is the go-to for NFTs, as it allows you to export only the content without the background. For the resolution, I recommend going 150 ppi, but you can definitely go to 300, which is the maximum. And for anti-aliasing settings, I use art optimized rather than type optimized. This will export the eye as it is, but I'll show you a bit later a practical application for this eye. Don't forget to do Ctrl or Command Z after exporting so you can return to the original color before trying other variations. Or another thing you could do is go to Edit, Edit Colors, convert to Grayscale, and then Edit, Edit Colors, convert to RGB. And now when we adjust the color balance once again, we're starting from a neutral position. Basically, we are working only with the values, not with the color tones. Let's bring back the nice blue color we had earlier, and optional, mess around with the iris gradient colors as well as the lines gradient just to make it a bit more interesting. Alright, practical application time. First, let's group everything together and we're going to name this object eye. Very creative, I know. And just hit Ctrl or Command C to copy the entire thing. And let's jump over here where I have prepared a dummy mock-up example, or whatever you want to call it, of a human face standing in for our NFT subject here. This face is also 100% vector, as you can see, and if you would like to see the process of creating it, please let me know in the comments below. Also, if you've enjoyed this video so far and maybe learned something, please leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. Okay, let's go ahead and select the eyes layer I created here in advance and hit Ctrl or Command V to paste your eye in place. Oh, that's a big eye. No problem, we resized it to fit our eye sockets here, like so. And of course, since the eyes layer is at the bottom, the eye will be shown behind our face. What's behind those blue eyes, nobody knows, not even Limp Bizkit. Just gonna make some minor adjustments to make sure the eye is in its proper place. Okay, looks pretty good, but let me just adjust the position of the iris a little bit. So I'll just select it and the pupil to move them together. I don't need to move anything else. We can also, of course, play with the size of the pupil, like I'm doing here, to make it look larger, to indicate that this person is very focused. Let me just make sure to align the pupil with the iris. So I'm gonna select the eye, expand the iris group, and then select just the iris shape without the lines, as well as the pupil. And make sure Align to Selection is used this time around. And align those both horizontally and vertically. And I'm making sure this tiny warp here is still in its place. Now another thing that I'm noticing is that the color of the eyeball is too bright for the overall composition of this face here, so let me just select the eyeball and open up the gradient options, and for the center color I'll reduce the brightness by changing the RGB values. Let's do 215 for each and see how that looks. Alright, a bit better now. Not perfect, but I'm not going to bother with this for now. Let me just select the entire eye, do a Ctrl or Command C and then Ctrl Command V, and I want to also reflect it vertically. So right click, transform, reflect vertical, and hit OK. And I'm doing my best to align it in the same position as the right eye, or maybe the left one if you're thinking from the perspective of our model here. And now what you're probably thinking is how exactly to export the set of eyes for my model and then be able to create more color variations and export those as well. Well, first of all, we need to keep only our eyes layer active. So after we've settled on the position of the eyes, we can turn the visibility of everything else off and just leave the eyes visible and go to export, export as PNG like before. But the one thing that you may notice is that Adobe is exporting only the eyes and the area between them, which is transparent either way. But what you actually want is for the eyes to be in the exact same position as you left them, because once you compile multiple variations of eyes, you want them to be in the same place you position them, which is behind the eye sockets of your model. So to do that, I found this way of creating a new layer. Then looking at that artboard size, make sure you know the exact size because we're going to be creating a square shape with those exact values. And then just selecting a random color and set the opacity of it to 0%. And of course align it both horizontally and vertically. Make sure align to artboard is used. And then we're going to lock this layer and leave it visible. Now when we go to export this, you'll see that the eyes are at the exact same position as you left them. Now I'm not sure if there's another way, like if you can export the artboard size alongside your visible content. If you guys know, again, let me know in the comments, but this is what I'm using as a workaround. Hope you enjoyed this video, hope you found it useful. Please feel free to check out my other ones. I'm going to be posting some more content which would hopefully help you create some quality NFTs. Let me know in the comments if you want to learn how you can create something specific, and until next time, good luck and happy drawing.